May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Kook Audio podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Kook Audio and Kook Archives, doing our bit to help preserve the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths cross his, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. So today we have a guest, Jesse Wiens Chu. I hope I'm pronouncing your middle name right, Jesse. I met Jesse, well, it says this in the podcast, but I'll say it real quick here. I met Jesse because we had met at Zen Center at Tassajara years ago. He was there at Zen Center between 2000 and 2007, and he moved to Bali and got hold of me, and it turned out he was a neighbor. 10-minute walk. And he and his wife, Catherine, and Katrina and I have become close friends. And they're very involved with NVC, nonviolent communication. And Jesse, and he's going to tell you this in the podcast, but, he got into NVC early in 2001 while he was at Zen Center because there was a priest at Zen Center into it. Anyway, he and Catherine hooked up and created this program, Ongo. And Ongo from, Ongo, the practice period, but they spell it O-N-G-O because Americans, where they were pronouncing it Ango. Anyway, they have a book, the Ongo book. It's Ongo, O-N-G-O, Ongo, ongobook.com. And it's really interesting. He'll talk about it. And, it combines MVC and other things they've learned. She had a background in Vipassana with Jack Cornfield. And, we've got a lot of Katrina and her and Jesse and I have a lot of stuff in common in our backgrounds. Anyway, their website for their training that they do is babatree.org. And that's the... I like to get the main information down right at first and put it in the metadata. Jesse has helped me with this new way to do podcasts with Squadcast. It's very interesting. And one reason I haven't had so many guests recently, well, one is because working on Tassajara Stories, the book coming out in September, the first book of 3 about the first year. The other reason is I wanted to be recording with my Mac, and I couldn't just call somebody on Skype and record it with Mac is like I could on my PC. And so he's helped me figure out how to do work with Squadcast without screwing it up, And so we had this little talk today. And so here we go. Why don't we give Jesse Wiens Chu a call and hear what he has to say about all this. Hi, Jesse.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi, Gloria. How are you, dear?
Good.
Gloria, so I'm going to ask your father some questions. Like, Jesse, tell me, what are you up to these days?
Well, which aspect would you like to hear about?
Whatever you have to
Yeah.
say.
Well, I guess One of the things I'm doing right now, together with my wife Catherine, is we're running a year-long program called Ongo Year of the Wood Snake, and we're integrating a lot of our different practices that we've studied and used applied in our life over the years, like things like Zen practice and nonviolent communication and kind of complementary practices to all those things, and sort of sharing that with other people in a way where we can kind of practice together over the course of a year remotely. So we've got people from all over the world, and we got two simultaneous translators translating it all into both Mandarin and Japanese as we do it. And yeah, it's cool. So we're just bringing people together to practice peace and wisdom and compassion in their daily life. That's
Now, I know you're involved with nonviolent communication, NVC. And is this an MVC program?
MVC is part of it for sure. It's a big part of it, but it's not exclusively MVC, I should say.
Do you call it something?
We developed this work we call Ongo now. We based it on the word comes from both the Ongo and the Japanese Zen tradition, the practice period, which itself comes from the Buddha's rains retreats, his monsoon retreats. But we based it on that, and also the idea of practice as being something ongoing that you do. And so Ongo became our shorthand for when we bring people together to kind of practice this hodgepodge of practices that have worked well for us in our life, which includes MVC, but it's not just MVC.
Yeah. Yeah.
Baba.
And Ongo has a sort of ongoing sound.
Yeah, that's part of it
ongoing.
Too. Yeah, that.
Yeah.
And
So, I appreciate your helping me to figure out how to use this new way to do podcasting. I'm using Squadcast. And, it's sort of interesting the way Jesse and Catherine and I met is that he sent me an email about a year ago or so, I don't remember, and said, "Hey, we met at Tassajara, and I hear you live in Bali, and we're living in Bali now." And I wrote back and said, "We'd like to say hello." I said, "Oh, yeah, sure. Where are you?" And then he sent me his address, and I said, "Oh, well, that's around the corner."
Literally,
from
right?
here.
Yes. It's so close.
Yeah, 10-minute walk. I timed it.
That's great.
Yeah, that took me 10. I'm sort of slow walker. Well, I had Bondi, the dog with me. So we met at Tassajara. How did you get into that?
Well, I mean, the truest thing I can say about it is it felt like a deep calling. I mean, if I put aside all circumstances, but the kind of immediate life circumstances that led me down that road was when I was 23, my father passed away of esophageal cancer, and I was with him for that last week of his life. And I was there at the moment that he passed, and that moment where it was like in one moment my father was there, and then the next moment it was just a body. It wasn't my father. It was a palpable difference I could feel. It was like he was gone. Whatever I thought was my father was gone in that moment, and so it led me to some life reflection, because the other thing that happened was when my father's, let's just call it his spirit, for lack of a better word, when his spirit left his body, that moment, the other thing that completely disappeared or lifted was any sense of burden or obligation I felt to live my life according to his wishes. So, and that had been with me. It
Aha.
was a he was a big presence in my life. So I had, up until that point, I had never really thought to live life according entirely to my own design. There was always some feeling of like it had to please him in some way. And so
Mm-hmm.
when he left his body, I that left too. And all of a sudden, it was like life just felt wide open. And
Mm.
so I spent the next couple of months with my stepmother, sort of helping her, you know, deal with the physical aspect of his loss. Helping with the house and taking care of his things, um, and moving back into a bedroom that I had slept in when I was a teenager, and just feeling like I needed to figure out my next steps, and everything shifted with his passing. So anything I had going on before that just felt like I just let go of. And
What were you doing
at,
beforehand that you might be moving away
yeah,
from at
well,
this point?
that's a whole interesting story too. Well, basically, I went to Rhode Island School of Design, uh, and I studied animation for my major. And one interesting connection here to the whole Tassajara Zen Center aspect is that one of my closest friends and roommates at one point was Norman Fisher's son, Noah Fisher, and so we were very close. And I had heard a little, just the smallest bit about growing up with his father as a Zen teacher, and those things, but I didn't really understand, I would say, or really connect to what it was all about. So after I graduated, I had this span of about a year, maybe a year and a half, where it was I got to try out uh, any and every job that at that point I had ever thought I might want to do. And it was just a rare opportunity. It was that kind of right at the beginning of the .com era, so there's a lot of money out there, a lot of jobs for young people, especially creative people who are coming out of art school, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of ease. It's not like it is today. So it was like I literally just take a job for a couple months, quit, take another job, and get paid, a lot of money. And what was interesting about that time was I really got to try out each of these things that I was excited about. So I had, for example, I had one idea. I was going to do a bunch of web design work, make a bunch of money, and then spend the rest of the time making fine art, just on my own. Use that to fund my
Uh-huh.
artistic life. And so I did that for a few months, right? And then until I realized like I didn't really have anything to say yet with my art, or that's what it felt like. So,
Huh.
another job I took on was the kind of there was a part of me that had always been curious about working in video games. So I took on a job at an interesting small game company. They were making very cool music composition games, and they gave me a great job just making little animations, according to my own creative whims. Great job. And then at the same time, there was something in it that I just felt like there was, what I might call now a kind of like an existential emptiness to it. Like I was missing something.
Yeah.
So I kind of went like job to job. And then by the time, just before I got the news about my father, I had arrived to working at a little one-man creperie stand, where you make crepes for people and you make smoothies, and
Yeah.
it's like and they just sit across the counter from you, and you're just like kind of shoot the shit with the people who come and dish them out crepes and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was really excited about that job. I thought this is it. At that time I was like, this is where I want to be. This is it.
Yeah.
And it was literally after I completed the training for that job. I completed the training for that job, and then I got a message on my answering machine from my dad, and he told me, he got the news he had a year to live, and he was going to go in the hospital. So I was in Rhode Island at that time, so I just drove straight down, and and that was that.
Down to
Oh,
where?
sorry.
You drove.
He lived in the Washington D.C. area of Northern Virginia. Yeah,
Is that where you
that
come
was where I
from?
was born and raised. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So that was, so I kind of left behind my kind of job experiments, and in a way that all became sort of completely different once the pressure I felt from my father was gone. And then what happened was I had this, I don't know where the idea came from, but I just had the idea like I need to go to a monastery. And I looked up, because I knew about Zen Center through Noah. I went ahead and looked up their website and saw that they had a practice period coming up in a couple months. And that was at Green Gulch Farm. And so I went ahead and signed up for that, knowing very little. Like I didn't, I had had pretty much no meditation experience up until that point, a lot of misconceptions about what it was. And I literally left for Green Gulch, and I kid you not, this is going to sound so ridiculous now, but I kid you not, I left for Green Gulch with the image in my mind that I was going to a place with where the hallways were like made out of stone, and they had torches on the walls, for lighting, and that monks would be in stone cells with cots. Like I literally had that image in my mind, probably from some movie about like a medieval Christian monastery or something. So, imagine my surprise when I got to Green Gulch, and it's a completely different feel. And I came with, a small backpack with like basically nothing, thinking we were going to live, a Spartan kind of ascetic existence. So I brought like very little. And then, they put me in, at that time, they had a dormitory in the downstairs of Cloud Hall, and just separated by shoji screens. And one of the first surprises I had was one of my neighbors down there was had a Discman. He was listening to CDs. And I was like, wait a second, this is not as, Spartan or ascetic as I thought it would be. So... Yeah.
Ah.
So okay. This is one last thing I can say about this whole transition here was that not long after I made the decision to apply for the practice period, I had a dream, and it was a very vivid dream. It was a very it was probably one of the most, again, for lack of a better word, I'll say spiritual dreams I had up until that point, because the feeling I had when I woke up was how real and important that dream was. It was like to my core. And in the dream, I dreamt that I was in my last minute or two of death. I was dying, basically, and I was basically making the transition from this body to some other place. And in that moment, my life flashed before my eyes, and I was going through my life, and there were two things that stuck out that I was really grateful. Like I felt like I could die in peace because I did those things. And one of those two things was to make the decision to go to the Zen monastery, to go to Green Gulch for practice period. So it was like this wild, deep confirmation of my choice at that time. And the other thing was to make this kind of crazy, spontaneous trip to go to Germany, to Berlin, to be with this woman I had met on a green tortoise desert hippie trip, to be with her for like a week. So basically, yeah, It was just like, and I think what was important about that for me was it was one of the first times in my life that I made a decision to do something that was purely out of just going with something that would make me really happy on a deep level, and not even considering poor use of money and resources, is it going to be a long-lasting relationship, all those kinds of things. It was just pure, I hadn't done that much in my life, so that was another thing that just felt really good.
Well, what year were you born?
76.
And what year did you go to Green Gulch?
2000.
Uh-huh. And this now I remember you told me you were at the Zen Center for 7
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
right? At what point did you have this dream?
Oh, that was just before I made the decision to go. So it was in 2000, the summer of 2000.
So you hadn't even arrived at Green Gulch yet, and you had the dream that it would be one of the things that you could die and be happy because you've been there.
Yeah. No, it was just, that's part of what was wild about the dream was it was just
Wow.
confirming something that I had made this decision, and I had no experience at that point yet if it was going to ever, pan out or, be anything. It was just, I had the dream. It was like, yes, you made the right decision.
I love your image of what it was going to be like. That is so great. So, all right. So you're there at Green Gulch. So how did it work out there? Did you take on some people as or some one or two or more as a teacher, and what did you do, and how was it at Zen Center? What places were you at and that sort of thing?
Well, that first practice period was with Tenshin Reb Anderson, and for me, it couldn't have been a more perfect teacher for me at that moment in my life because, for me, he totally he kind of fit my hopes for like some, I don't even know what words to use now because the way I was thinking then is so different from how I think now. But, I guess like some kind of Jedi master version of Zen, Reb Anderson, he kind of fit that for me for what I was looking for. So, I remember when we did our, practice period opening ceremony and that part where you go around the zendo and you kind of have your hands together and you're kind of bent over and walking around the zendo, and
Right.
and then you come to the teacher and then you exchange a bow, and I remember again it was coming from this place where I had just this really fantastical misconception of what all of this was, and I was still sort of in that place. I really didn't know what I was doing. But I came and I did that bow to Reb, and he and when I came up, our eyes met, and it was like a jolt of lightning through my body. Like I just it was and I don't know what it was, or I can't explain it or anything, but all I can say is I do think I was very much in the right place at the right time for my life. Obviously there was something in me that was ready to receive that. So, so it was it was like this intense experience I'd never had before. We met eyes. It was like this jolt of lightning through my body. And I walked away like, whoa, what just happened? Like, I just felt like this shaken. My whole body was sort of shaken. And, so anyway, that's sort of how it began. And then, so I wanted to continue to study with Reb after that first practice period. And because I was sort of still in this mode of everything has to be hardcore, I have to really do it full on, So it was from that first practice period at Green Gulch, I was like, well, I need to go to Tassajara because that's where you got to go to be really intense with practice. And so I went from Green Gulch to Tassajara. And then, and then I came back to Green Gulch after that first practice period at Tassajara so that I could, take precepts with Reb and so Rakasu and all those kinds of things. So, so it was the beginning of a journey. And I'll just share, just for humor's sake, one of the other things that I had total misconceptions about was meditation, zazen, and I had taken in some ideas. So when I was back at Rhode Island School of Design, there was some Korean monks who would occasionally lead sitting meditation groups at Rhode Island School of Design. And again, coming from this
Uh-huh.
place of being curious about like, I guess Jedi's and the Force, and I thought, oh, I want to try one of these. And so they turned, I know now they were from that Korean lineage, the Sungsang is their lineage, I think. The Quantum Zen school. Anyway, so one of their teachers, in trying to explain meditation instruction, he used words or metaphors like it's like a different way of seeing. So I took those kinds of things quite literally at that stage in my life. So when I came to Green Gulch and I was in Tongariro, so just sitting, from break of dawn, well, not even before break of dawn till bedtime in the Zendo without much knowledge about what you do, I sat there constantly focusing and refocusing my eyes, trying to see something different, literally. So I was like, I was looking at the meditation, the wall in front of me and the floor in front of me, and I was like trying to like find a different way of seeing, literally, the whole
Right.
time. And well, as you imagine, it's kind of exhausting, but yeah, that's where it's coming
I
from.
I think that I get the feeling that we'd all be doing something like that. I mean, that's sort of easy to look at and think and ridicule or
Yeah.
whatever, right? But I don't know. I think we're always doing something like that,
Yeah.
right? Some like Suzuki would say, don't have some idea, don't stick to some idea, don't go on any trips. That's a trip, right? And then we'll be thinking, well, I'm not going on a trip now. There'll be something else that we don't realize. So I think also in pursuing, some approach that one thinks might be helpful in meditation or something that really isn't, that is part of the path. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of like you got to experience what not to do before you can find what to do. Yeah.
Right. And I remember Dogen saying, that whatever thought one has before one is enlightened, it isn't what led to enlightenment. Well, that's interesting. Now, Reb had rather strict requirements for people who were his disciples or something. Now, maybe that's those who are with him to be ordained as priests.
Yeah, I think.
Right. Were you on that trajectory with him?
I had been curious about it. In the end, I decided not to. And I don't. My decision not to, though, wasn't really because of his strict requirements, although I was aware of them. I think for me, I wasn't really bothered by his requirements because my mindset was always on the strict side anyway. Like that was kind of why that was what I gravitated towards. So that's part of why he was a really good teacher for me initially, because that's just where I was. I needed to be with people who had what I perceived as being like really, really intense or dedicated or something. But no, I toyed back and forth for quite a long time about whether I wanted to ordain or not. And yeah, it's an interesting question for me because I can say actually from this moment in my life that And I could say maybe all along that there's a part of me that knows that, you know, whether I literally ordain or not, there's a part of me that always knows like that is part of my life, or it is who I am. It's going to be part of my life. So, you know, what I joke about now is that maybe after the kids are all, you know, grown up and adults and living their own lives, maybe I'll ordain then. So maybe I'll be one of those people that ordains in the last, like, you know, 10, 15 or 5 or 20 years of my life, whatever, however long I live, you know. So there's a part of me that thinks maybe I'll do it then. But as far as choosing not to do it when I was at Zen Center, for me, it was kind of like my internal sense of my own path was that I needed to learn in a different way, or I had life lessons to learn that needed to be outside of that container. Because in a way, I feel like I don't know. This is weird to say it this way, but I think karmically, I'm drawn to being a monastic, but dharmically, I feel like I need to experience life as a layperson, and then I think I can always come back and ordain. But and I can certainly say now that, you know, in retrospect, looking back in the last, you know, what is it, about 18 years since I left Zen Center, like I feel like I've grown in leaps and bounds in the directions that I struggled with when I was in Zen Center, because I really needed to step out of certain aspects of my comfort zone that I was at when I was within the monastic confines. So, yeah.
Yeah. How dominant is the idea of becoming a priest in Zen Center? Mm-hmm. I mean, is it like, well, if you're not doing that, you're not really serious? Yeah. You know what I mean? Or how do you see the priest path and the lay path there? Are they distinct? Are there just so many different ways it can be expressed that it's hard to say what's what? Or is there a pressure to become a priest, or you won't be thought of as serious, etc.?
I didn't see that there was any pressure. Well, I'm guessing things have changed quite a bit since when I was there. I mean, I was there from 2000 to 2007, so, and then the pandemic happened as well. So I'm guessing there's a lot of different changes in the culture there. But I can only speak for when I was there. I didn't feel that kind of pressure at all. What I did feel, though, at that time was they were still trying to figure out what the lay path was there. I think it was still there's. You know, it was only at that time, that 2000 to 2007 time, and I don't remember which year, but it was around that time that they came up with the, I forgot what they called it. I don't know if they called it lay Dharma transmission or whatever, but I remember like Leslie went through that, and maybe Wendy Johnson. I'm not sure, but they
yeah, my first wife is and there's different ways of describing it. She corrected me. I can't remember what the right thing to say is. Lay entrustment. Lay entrustment.
So,
but I think there's lay entrustment, and then there's something else. I forget. I have to ask her. She can explain. And you know who can really explain it is Vicki Austin. She's the keeper of the secrets, and she knows. She has. What would you say? Managed like over 100 transmissions and ordinations and things.
Yeah, so that only started to happen while I was there, which to me seems like a very long time, you know, since the beginning of Zen Center to have only figured it out then. But I think what it symbolizes, though, is that they were at Zen Center. It seemed like they're really trying to figure out at that time how to distinguish the two paths, and all I know is that, you know, it was a good time for me to be there because of how kind of confused I was about it myself. Like, you know, it gave me a lot of room to be sort of ambiguous about it. So I didn't, you know, go through ordination, but at the same time, because I was so, you know, intense about my Zen training, I was shaving my head just like a monk and wearing, lay robes, but, doing it in a kind of like an overly fussy way, like trying to, so it was kind
Ah,
of like I was sort of in a way trying to sincerely practice as if I was ordained, going from practice
uh-huh.
period to practice period, sesshin to sesshin, I was sort of trying to sincerely practice as if I ordained, even though I was not, I was just taking lay precepts. So it was a good time for me to be there because I think the teachers there were willing to kind of put up with my, my, uh, blurring the lines, I guess, between the kinds of forms of practice.
Yeah. Now, uh, when before we started Tassajara, there were only two males who had shaved their heads, and rather eccentric practitioners, uh, Daniel Agic and Lori
Mm.
Palmer. Lori was wonderful. And then when we got Tassajara, all the guys were, not all, but almost all the guys were shaving
Yeah.
their heads, and Suzuki Roshi
Yeah.
liked that. And uh, it wasn't a requirement, but, it's the
Yeah.
style, and we all did it. He called it the ultimate in hairstyling. Uh, and then when Tatsugami came to be the guest teacher, he said, only monks shave their
Mm.
heads. Don't shave. You can cut it short, but don't shave your head if you're not a
Mm.
priest or monk. See, that's another thing is the use of the
Yeah.
words. We were never comfortable completely with the word
Yeah.
priest, but we were less comfortable with the word monk, and we certainly weren't going to use the word nun. And Suzuki gave a talk. I think it was around the time we moved into the building. Yeah, Page Street. So, it could have been 69. We moved in there in maybe in November 69 or early 71. We're neither priest nor
Mm-hmm.
lay. And he just said, well, something in between. And there was a way in which sometimes he would differentiate. Like there's those who are priests, they're disciples, and there's those who are lay, they're students. But more often it would be one is not better than the other, and the priests aren't really priests and the lay aren't really lay. I mean, there were so many people that were, there were only a few people who had been ordained as priests, and everybody was, well, not everybody. People were practicing in different paths, but there was a great deal of similarity to what the priests were doing and the lay were doing. I can remember at one point I said, well, the priests get married and the lay people are
Mm-hmm.
celibate. And, I mean, there were some of the strictest people were among the lay
Yeah.
people, and some of the, priests had been around longer and they were, doing other
Yeah.
things and looser. So it was always sort of hard to define and also changing the culture evolving.
Yes.
So you left. So what'd you do? When did you leave? How did you decide? Where'd you go?
So I left at the close to the end of 2007, and about a year before I left, I already had the sense I was going to be leaving in 2007. I could feel like there was an internal voice that was basically like you've learned what you need to learn for now from here, and it's time to go out. And I kind of heard that as a clear message, and so I had already been starting to think about moving out and what that might look like. And then what sort of gave that shape was I met my wife now, Catherine. We met at a nonviolent communication retreat in Albuquerque, New Mexico, at the beginning.
What
This was
year?
also
What year?
2007, on Valentine's Day, February 14th, and
Uh-huh.
um, and
Oh, that's very
yeah,
sweet.
and it was also a
Valentine's
very
Day.
it was also one of those very what do you call it, like kind of I'm searching for these words that I keep using the word spiritual, but it's not really what I mean. But there's kind of some kind of spiritual connection in that I arrived at the check-in for the international intensive in nonviolent communication, and Catherine was helping check people in, and we both had this immediate sense of recognizing one another, and we didn't know why, and we kept for the next several days we kept talking through places we'd been and people we knew to see if there was actually a place we actually connected, and we really couldn't land on anything, but we did get the one thing that was in common, and maybe we did actually see each other at one point, was that she had spent some time at Green Gulch and knew a lot of the teachers there as well, and had a lot of friends there. And she'd been mostly a Vipassana practitioner with Jack Cornfield and folks from Spirit Rock, but she was also close with Wendy Johnson and some people at Green Gulch. So we had some of that in common. So basically what happened was, so once I met her at that retreat, we kept up our connection, and a few things happened. One is that we got together, but then the other thing that happened was we immediately started responding to some basically requests for teachers of nonviolent communication to come to some different countries, different places, and so we started doing that year in 2007. So 2007 was like this.
Wait. What, did you just start living together right away or something?
Not exactly. First we started working together, which was kind of also pretty intense, because basically from meeting on Valentine's Day in 2007, and I was still living at the Zen Center then, and I stayed living at the Zen Center through most of that year, but Catherine and I started working together internationally. So that year that year alone, in July, we flew to Canada to do some outdoor-based nonviolent communication trainings, and then in August we went to Australia and did a number of trainings there, and then in top of November, and this was the really big one, was we went to Afghanistan, and this is during the height of the U.S. bombing of Afghanistan. We went to Afghanistan in November of 2007 and did some trainings in Kabul, Afghanistan.
So kidding.
I kind of went from living in the Zen Center and this kind of fairly low stimulation lifestyle to these big projects and trainings, and with Catherine.
Yeah. Now wait. So you met her in 2007, 4 days from now.
Yep.
On the 12th, right? And
or on the 14th, I should say, 6 days from now.
Oh, 14. Do I have it wrong? It's
14th,
the 14th is Valentine's Day. Oh, all right.
Better get that right for Katrina.
Oh, yeah, no kidding. Yeah. But you already had experience with MVC then?
Yes, I'd been studying MVC for about 6 years. Yeah.
Oh, so you started studying MVC a year after you came to Zen Center?
Yeah, well, the circumstance of that was that one of the priests at Tassajara, Jane Lazar, had been a nonviolent communication trainer prior to coming to Zen Center, and she offered free classes to anyone who was interested at Tassajara. And then I was one of only 2 people who were excited about that, and so we just met with her each week, and then and then later I moved to City Center in San Francisco, and that was around 2004, I think, 2003 or 2004. And at that time, one of the things I was interested in was whenever the founder of nonviolent communication came around, Marshall Rosenberg, he would lead workshops in San Francisco, usually for like a month, and I would just go and take as many of them as I could. So those are some of the things I did. But yeah, I started in 2001.
Can you give us a little what is MVC in a nutshell?
Sure. Well, from a Zen perspective or a Buddhist perspective, I would say it's a very articulate practice of right speech uh, for for modern times. But nonviolent communication is generally defined as the intention is to create a quality of connection with others that enables people to give to one another or meet each other's needs or meet needs through compassionate giving. So the idea being we're creating a connection with our words and with our tone and with our energy and our communication so that we're able to be compassionate with one another and not respond to one another from, let's say, a sense of duty, shame, obligation, blame, guilt, all the kinds of things that plague communication most of the time. It's a way through that gets us more to our compassionate nature. So I find it to be, when I was at Zen Center, one of the reasons I really appreciated it was I really got from the moment I was at Zen Center the depth of, you could say, compassion consciousness that the practitioners there were cultivating through the Zazen and through the forms. And I really appreciated that and I felt it. But what I also experienced was that when it came to how people related to one another verbally, that all the same kinds of issues happened outside the Zen Center. And part of what I saw was that nonviolent communication actually gave some real skills, skillful means to work with that and actually shift that dynamic. That we didn't have to relate in those ways all the time. There was actually ways. There's more skillful ways to do it that actually helped better convey that compassionate consciousness that we all had, when we're cultivating.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. One thing I've run into in talking to people who've been at Zen Center is there's too often I hear people feel they weren't appreciated, or especially around the time they left, some of them felt like they felt like not appreciated is I think a good umbrella term for it. It was, and I can go back and remember, sometimes in general I was a pretty soft administrator, but I can remember times when I was too hard on somebody unnecessarily. But anyway, how did you feel? Did you feel appreciated?
Oh yeah. My experience at Zen Center was very positive, but I knew a lot of people who had not so positive experiences. And
right. Mine was, and always has been too. And but yeah.
No, I definitely got the sense that if I had stayed, it would have been welcome for me to continue staying, and I also got the sense that in leaving, people understood and could support it as well. So
yeah. A lot of groups, and this is true in Zen temples in Japan. No matter how long you've been there, if you leave, you've failed.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a lot of groups that that have that. I feel that Zen Center overall has appreciated its role as being a place for people to practice for some period of time. But what do you think? Looking at it from that point of view,
and again, I would say I don't know if this has changed at all since I left. So I'm definitely speaking for that particular period from 2000 to 2007. But I would say for that time I was there, I mean, when I look back, I think I was one of the luckiest individuals on this planet. I mean, I feel like what a rare opportunity I got to spend 7 years of my life just devoted to practicing Zen and meditation and studying with, like, when if I could rattle off the list for a moment of the things that I feel like I was just so blessed to be there. I mean, I got to be at a Zen temple where they weren't attached to one single teacher, so I got to experience a diversity of teachers, male
Yes.
and female. I got to experience, and they were constantly like, they had like the Soto Zen, of America retreat there. So I got to experience all these outside teachers coming in and leading a sesshin, and that I was part of.
Yeah.
I got to practice at these places at a time where they still were finding ways for people, and this may have changed, but at that time, I could practice at Tassajara and be paid to practice at Tassajara. Like to me, I don't even know that they would do that anymore.
Really? You mean you were getting
I was getting a stipend because I
or-
was working as a guest chef. Oh, hang on just
Yeah.
1 second.
Sure.
I got a question from Catherine. If
Yes.
you're listening to this podcast, you will hear from Catherine later.
Yes, you will be hearing from Catherine, I hope, next.
Let me complete that thought because to me this is really important. That at Tassajara, this was only my second summer at Tassajara where they started paying me a stipend, but they gave me a job, and again, coming from, I was so excited for that creperie job prior to all of this. And
Oh, I
they gave me a
understand that.
job
Yeah.
cooking, fancy meals for the guests during the summer, and I had never gone through executive chef training, so they just handed me this job. I'm cooking for wealthy guests, and I got to make up whatever meals I wanted to make. So I was just diving into recipe books, making up these, trying out everything, and they were paying me for that, and I got to practice, Zazen. I mean, to
Yeah.
me, now in this day and age where people, like can't even think about, you can hold a full-time job and can't even buy a house, like I think I was the luckiest person alive, that I got to experience that, So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, getting a stipend, doing that and getting a stipend is, I understand that. Yeah. I think that generally has been the case. There's been both, people who pay to be there. People, I was always, I wouldn't, I was another category because I had a little money and I helped out at first and this and that. I don't ever remember paying dues, becoming a member,
Yeah.
anything. And I'd loan money to Zen Center, and then they'd pay it back little by little, and then I'd owe them money, and then we had the weirdest financial relationship. But it was good. All right. So hey, I'm back in Kandahar here now.
I was never in Kandahar. I was
were
in
you
Kabul. Yeah.
Right. Who were you giving this NVC workshop to? Was it local people or was it Americans, foreigners, a mix?
Yeah.
What?
It was local people, although, probably the people who probably needed the most were the American contractors. But I think we were there responding to a request. It had been sent out through the network of trainers in nonviolent communication that there was a local man wanted to organize a nonviolent communication training there, and so his name was Han, and he was the director of a nonprofit called the Bureau for Reconstruction and Development. And the way he described his organization's work in Afghanistan was that it was peace and plumbing, and so he hired us. We were one of the only trainers. We were one of only Catherine and myself. We were one of two of only 4 trainers to respond to that request. He sent it out to the network of a few hundred trainers, and only the 4 of us were interested in responding. And so Catherine and I, we went first with another dear friend who was also, he had just graduated from the European Peace University. And the three of us, and we brought our own translator, an Iranian woman that he knew. And it was like, again, it was sort of like crazy in how naive it was in a way. I mean, we were going into an active war zone on some level. It was, you know, it was the height of the U.S. bombings in Afghanistan, and we basically raised the money from our friends and family and, you know, connections. We even we were at an organic farm and during their harvest festival, and we squeezed apple cider for donations. I mean, we did a lot of things, just raised a lot of money to go, and then we went there, and we did 2 trainings. We did a week training for the Bureau for Reconstruction Development. Everyone attending was local people, from government officials all the way down to like teachers and journalists and social workers. And probably the highest ranking person who was there in our training was the head of the Ministry for Women's Affairs in the government. She was there. And then we also did because Catherine's background is working with young people, and she ran a school, K through 8 school that she had founded. She was really passionate and skillful in working with kids. So she requested, could we also work with kids while we were there? And they arranged a day where we worked with children. And again, a wide range of children. Everyone, you know, there were children there that were just living on the streets, to children who'd been, you know, human trafficked, to children of wealthy families in Kabul. And we did a day for children as well. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's something. So, so you and Catherine have been doing this for almost 18 years. It'll be 18 years in 6 days.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah.
Katrinka and I do that too. We'll be 21 years on May 1st, but that isn't having met. That's like being an item, you know.
Yes.
And from that day, that was it. We were together.
Yeah.
You know, and it's that's interesting. So, how many different things have you done? Have you just been doing MVC and this program you're doing now? What are you calling the thing you're doing now? I can't remember. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, you've got the book, Ongo.
Yes, that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, one thing I want to do, I want to plug your book, Ongo. See, this gives doing a podcast with somebody gives us an opportunity to plug the book and put the book in our bibliography. So tell me about Ongo, and you all spell it Ongo in the book. Do you always spell it Ongo?
We do, although there's a funny story behind that too, which is that so when we first created Ongo, we were living in North Carolina. And I'll explain a little bit more about the creation of Ongo in a moment, but when we ran our first Ongo, we were living in North Carolina, and we were using the Japanese, you know, Romaji spelling of Ango, and so we had Southerners who were in it calling it Ango. You know, they were part of the Ango program, and and we were like, well, we let it go for that time. We were like, I think we need to change how we spell it, so people don't call it Ango.
Right.
And then we realized once we shifted the spelling to Ongo, we were like, yeah, that's like short for ongoing, which is kind of the spirit of it, you know. So anyway, so then that shift stuck. After that we just always called it Ongo. But
yeah. And that's good too, because that really differentiates it as not being an Ongo. It's something that comes out of Ongo, but related. I like it.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah. So the way that came about was by 2010. So from 2000 to 2007 to 2010, Catherine and I just started. We were doing international trainings in this stuff for all over the world. We were flying around. I think by 2012 we had counted. We were on 38 airplanes that year in 2012. It was ridiculous. We were flying around so much, and but in 2010, we'd already been doing it for a few years, and we just really recognized that one of the patterns we saw that was really consistent was, we could offer all kinds of workshops or even longer retreats, like 7-day retreats or 10-day retreats, and the same kinds of questions were always going to come up at the end, which is sort of like, well, this has been a great training. It's changed my life. It's, all these things have happened. It's fantastic. Now, what do I do? Because I'm going to go home. Now, what do I do? And we recognized from our own experience that, just like Zen practice itself, that retreats are great, sesshin is great, all those things are great. But then what do you do in your daily life? What's the ongoing practice? How do you take it off the cushion? How do you take it into your life? And fortunately, both of us came from that background where, from Zen training, that, it kind of gives you some guidance around how do you take the practice into your life. There's ways of thinking about it and applying it and living it. And we also recognize that we, even with nonviolent communication, we'd experienced, not just taking workshops and retreats or trainings, but being part of practice groups that met weekly and just doing it, over and over again, and then trying out things in your life and your actual relationships. So basically what we decided was we need to create a kind of a support program for people that, after they've taken a workshop or training, they could join us for a period of a few months where we're meeting with them weekly and supporting them to kind of integrate it into their life. And basically the two things that came together for that were we used the template of a practice period, so having a 3-month Ongo period of intensive practice of integrating these practices into your life. And we were using that kind of early international conference technology, pre-Zoom, it was all like teleconference calls, and they had these free teleconference softwares that you could use, and people from all around the world could dial into the same conference room. And so we would meet every week with people all around the world over teleconference call and lead them through practices that we would do on the call together. And then in between the weekly meeting, we would, email them all a daily practice. So every day we would email them a new 10, 20-minute practice that they could do to integrate the practices into their day. And then we did two other things, actually. We also did what we called buddy practices. So every week, each person in the program would meet with another person to do a practice together, one-on-one, over the phone. And then the last thing was we would meet with every person in the program once a month, ourselves one-on-one, kind of like practice discussion, to just work with them for 1 hour in practice discussion style. So that was the format we created, and it really took off. It really, not just in terms of people being interested in it, because we were clearly meeting an existing desire or need, but it actually really took off in terms of that, to our pleasant surprise, that people were going through really profound transformations, really developing their skill, really developing their compassion, becoming more free with the stuff that was their psychological stuff that they were getting stuck on in their lives. So that was really gratifying. We could really see that it was actually helping people quite a bit. Yeah. So that's how it started. And you mentioned the book, so I'll just tie that thread. And basically, the book is after we've been doing those virtual Ongos for a number of years, we decided the next step was to create a handbook that people could self-organize and do a 3-month Ongo together without us needing to be the guides, but actually that people could guide each other through it, and that they would have their own experience of self-organizing a group, and then every week meeting as a group, doing a practice in the book, self-organizing buddies that they would do a one-on-one practice with each other each week, and then doing these like daily solo practices in their own personal lives. So we basically put all of that into a book form. And that has been like, I mean, for me, it kind of blows my mind actually how much people get out of that book without having ever studied with us at all. They just do the book and they have these great experiences. So that is really, really cool for me.
All right. So what is the book called?
It's called The Ongo Book, ONGO, The Ongo Book. Everyday.
Does it have a subtitle?
Everyday Nonviolence. And the one that's out now is called The Ongo Book 2.0 because now it's in a revised edition. Yeah. Second edition.
Is it the Ongo Book is 2.0 the subtitle?
2.0 is now part of the title, Ongo Book, The Ongo Book 2.0, and it's Everyday Nonviolence.
Yeah. Okay. Which one do we have?
2.0. Yeah.
All right.
And if people are interested in that, you can just go to ongobook.com, ongobook.com, and that has more information about the book.
Oh, ongobook.com.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And what about your work? Is that ongobook.com the website for your work?
No, that's just the book. Our work, I would say, go to our main nonprofit organization, which is called babatree.org. That's B as in boy, A, B as in boy, A, tree.org. Yeah.
Where does that come from?
So we started a nonprofit organization called Baba Tree International in 2011. And Baba in a lot of languages means either ancestor or father. And because my mother's Chinese, I grew up calling my father Baba. But the idea behind Baba Tree is that so Baba Tree does what we call practical peace. And the idea behind it is that we're taking this kind of ancestor wisdom, the Baba Tree of wisdom from humanity. We're taking this ancestor wisdom that we all, in some ways, have what do you call it? You could say we have a human right to it. We all have this. Many cultures, we have these bodies of ancestor wisdom, whether it comes through Buddhism, whether it comes through other cultural histories in the culture. We all have this ancestor wisdom that helps support living together peacefully, harmoniously, productively, wisely, compassionately. And so our organization's work is basically to disseminate that ancestor wisdom for modern times and help that continue for generations to come. Basically, Baba Tree International, our organization, is about helping to share that, what we're calling the kind of ancestor wisdom, the wisdom that through many cultures throughout history has sought to support people to live together peacefully, productively, and harmoniously. That's wisdom that we can actually share and pass on and apply to modern day issues. So we include, practices that come out of Buddhism in that. We include nonviolent communication in that. Those kinds of things we help disseminate through our work.
So you've been in Bali now a year and a half or something. And what brought you here? Have you worked with Indonesians? I mean, there's more than just Balinese here. Have you worked with local people? Is there a local group tied into it, et cetera?
We came here for a variety of reasons, but I would say largely what caused us to settle here is we appreciated the cultural climate, which we felt was really what would be the word I would use? It's rich, warm. We appreciate the kind of the regular spiritual reminders just being here all the time, on any given day, might be in the middle of an errand or something, and then we're stopped because there's a giant procession, honoring something, and we actually like that kind of thing. We like that.
You know what today is?
No, actually.
Saraswati Day. It's the day for education and books. And I wish I could say more about Saraswati. Well, actually, I can throw it in later.
So I mean, that's the kind of thing we love. We love that there's things, that there's just such a strong consciousness of always being in relationship to something greater than the human mind and capitalism.
Right.
So,
well, there's Hinduism, I mean, for the Balinese, but what you really see is the animism, right? The constant offering.
The constant offerings.
No end of it, every day.
We like living amidst constant offerings. That really supports how we want to live in our lives. It's really,
Right. But there are so many offerings made in our home. And Cadet brings offerings, the housekeeper that but Katut, who comes, they alternate days. Katut brings a big stack of these palm leaf offerings. And, I talked to her, I said, I don't, I'm giving her $50,000 a week now, which is like $3 now, to cover her expenses for that. But she'll bring incense and stuff. I'm not really even sure where she puts some. We've got an altar, and our landlord gave us a Buddha that he grew up with. That's on our altar, like in the kitchen. But there's an altar upstairs here. There's an altar downstairs, and these are altars like that Katrinka put together, very little. But there's the sort of official home temple, pura or sangha. A sangha is like a little, doesn't mean practicing group. Sangha here means like a little altar or something. There's the pura, I guess we call it, the home temple, which is, you can walk into, walk around, and they make offering. But there's little cubbies they make offering. And there's always an offering in front of the gate. Not always. Some days there's no offering in front of the gate. I don't try to understand.
That's the other part. Part we appreciate. We don't feel like we have to understand all of it. It's nice to just feel that that's just part of the activity of life. Constant offerings.
Yeah, it's great. During COVID, we helped a lot of people, we had to, because they were going to drown if we didn't, but because the standard of living here is so low, we could afford to do it, but, and some people, like the woman down the street, they have a villa. They have a number of buildings in there, and a big extended family. She has a little fruit, vegetable stand in front. She would ask me for money during COVID sometimes. But what did she need it for? Offerings. This one, people were asking me money so they could afford to go to a ceremony or make offerings. And a little for food. We were involved in disseminating food, but there was a lot of it about offerings.
That's like the most important thing. I love that. Yeah.
I do too. In Japan too, animism is very important. And it's animism is what holds the countries together. The stronger the animism, the stronger the culture.
I love that insight.
Yeah,
I love that insight.
yeah. And there's hardly anything. It doesn't have this. Is there a God? Isn't there a God? A dichotomy, an argument about it or anything.
Yeah.
You know, people do drop out of it though because it's expensive. Being a Hindu here, and they become Christians. Because being a Christian is cheap.
So this is going to be a whole other discussion I could dive into with you about the U.S.
Right. Well, I know you've got to go. We're going off for my birthday weekend to Sukhiwadi. Oh, I want to tell you one thing I'm doing. We're going to Sukhiwadi, which we'll get to in 35, 40 minutes, right? To this nice little villa for 2 days. But there is a Japanese neighbor of ours is in a convalescent home there. And I will go. I've seen him twice already. And I will play him the morning service from Eiheiji with a speaker. He's Sotochu.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? His family. And I'm giving him, I got him some earbuds now, and I'm going to show him how he can, because I've got the AAG services on Q.com where you can listen to them. It's hard to know what's all there. But, and then I never wear my rock suit, hardly ever. Well, I wore it the other day when I met with a group on Zoom. But anyway, I'll bring my rock suit, and we'll do that, and I'll say hello. I can't remember much Japanese, but he's been here a long time. Mainly, he'll just put his hands in gassho and say thank you. But he's near where we're going. Yeah.
I love hearing that that's where you're going to go from here, and it just gives me a warm feeling. It's like that constant.
I hardly do anything. Yeah, I hardly do anything like that. But I realize how many people I know that have done various types of service and helping, and social work, doctor, nurse, what you all do. I really appreciate, and so many local people I know who are extending themselves to others. We got to do more of it, I guess.
Yeah. That's what we all need. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Jesse Chu.
Yes.
But what's your full name? What are you
Jesse
using?
Wiens Chu. Yeah.
Jesse Wiens Chu. And Wiens is?
It's my father's name. When my father passed away, I took my mother's name, which is Chu, C-H-U.
Yeah. And is Wiens Jewish?
Wiens is, no, it's, but it does come from, it's the same Wiens as the Vienna, Austria, Wien. It's the same Wien.
Oh, so you're German like me.
And kind of in a several generations removed kind of way.
Yeah, I'm half German completely. Yeah. My mother, she was 100%. And you're half Chinese, which is not at all apparent.
Right. No, I look a lot like my father.
Yeah. All right. Well, Jesse, very good. Mudik will be coming over to install your water filter for your shower. That's another great thing about living here is nominal expense. We don't have to figure out how to do that. Somebody else will do it.
Thank you for helping with that.
Yeah. All right. Well, you take care, and we will be in touch. And thanks a lot for helping me with the technology for the podcast and doing the podcast. And I'm looking forward to talking to your wife, Catherine, in the same way.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation, David, and I enjoyed spending this time with you this morning. Yeah.
Okay. And now I'm going to turn the recording off, and then we've got to stay on for a little bit. So thanks a lot, Jesse. Jesse Wiens Chu. And let me remind you all that you can go to the ongobook.com, O-N-G-O, and babatree.org to learn more about them and their practice and teaching and so forth. This has been a Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from Sleepy Sanur with Doggett Bandita, Feline Manicita, and dear lovely Katrinka. And we're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.